Hi, I'm Tori Gershom, and here with us today is the press commentator for the Armored Service Committee, Miss Asley Birow. So how are you today, Miss Asley Birow?
I'm good, thanks for asking.
Now, just to get right to it, now what exactly does the Armored Service Committee do? What are their responsibilities in the Senate?
The Armored Services Committee is a legislative committee that oversees the nation's military, such as the Armed Services Department, and they also conduct military research and weapon development, and they oversee matters that pertain to national security.
That seems like a lot of work. So who's in charge of all this work?
Carl Levin is in charge of it.
Now, who's all serving on the committee? Are there like a lot of people? Because it seems like there has to be a lot of people to accomplish all this, or are there just a few?
There's about 20 people serving on the committee. For the Republicans, we have John McCain, James Inhofe, Jeff Sessions, Saxby Chambliss, Lindsey Graham, John Thune, Roger Wicker, George Lamux, Richard Burr, David Bitter, and Susan Collins. And as for the Democrats, we have Carl Levin, Robert Byrd, Jack Reed, Daniel Akaka, Bill Nelson, Ben Nelson, Evan Bay, Jim Webb, Claire McCaskill, Mark Udall, Kay Hagan, Mark Bejic, Roland Burris, and Paul Kirk Jr. And we have one independent party, which is Joe Lieberman.
Now, how does the committee exactly divide its work? Do they divide it in smaller subcommittees, or do they just say, have one person do one thing, have another person do another thing? Like, how do they try to accomplish all?
We divide our work up into subcommittees. We have 6 of them. They're Airland, Emerging Threats and Capabilities, Personnel, Readiness and Management Support, Sea Power, and Strategic Forces.
Now, who's all in charge of these subcommittees?
We have a chairperson for each subcommittee. Joe Lieberman is in charge of Airland, Jack Reed is in charge of Emerging Threats and Capabilities, Ben Nelson is in charge of Personnel, Evan Bay is in charge of Readiness and Management Support, Bill Nelson is in charge of Strategic Forces, and there's currently no one in charge of the Sea Power subcommittee.
So how do you exactly divide the bills that you're trying to create?
We divide our bills into different categories. We put them into categories such as medical, economic, warfare, veterans, military recognition, and bills that we want to add to the Constitution.
Now, I did some research here, and it says that most of your bills are warfare, economic, and medical. Could you explain some of those?
Well, we're trying to cut back as much as possible due to the recession, but we don't want to cut back on our costs too much because we need to provide them with weapons and food and other materials to keep them safe and healthy.
Now, with the medical, how's insurance? How are you trying to keep up with the veterans' insurance and with the soldiers' insurance? Like, are you trying to keep bills that are kind of like stopping them or halfway, or are you actually providing bills that are helping them?
Yeah, we've had a few new bills that we've made to help the veterans and the soldiers who just returned from war because they served and did their time, and so we'd like to thank them, and they deserve it.
Well, thank you for this insight, Miss Asley Birow. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Thanks, it was a pleasure meeting you too.
Now, after this short break, we are going to interview a soldier who is on his 3rd tour in Afghanistan, Major Ron Counts. So see you after the break. Okay, we're done.
Hello, Brad Benson speaking.
Hi, Brad. It's W. Listen, I hear you're having a big sale.
Yes, sir. We're taking 30% off of every new Hyundai in stock.
Finally, some good news.
Everything okay, Mr. President?
Well, that south of the border psychopath is driving me nuts. Kind of shoe addiction is running up the national debt. And, on top of that, I feel like Kathy Pelosi's lapdog.
You mean Nancy Pelosi, don't you, Mr. President?
Whatever. Yeehaw!
And welcome back. Now we will interview Major Ron Counts, who is serving his 3rd tour in Afghanistan. How are you today, Major?
I'm fine. Thank you for asking.
So, do you think that the Armored Service Committee is helping out with the war in Afghanistan?
Well, that's actually a very good question. I think we have a few of the bills that are really helping out, especially for treatments of wounded service members, and also for service members' welfare once they return back to the United States, and then they need treatment, whether it be psychological or medical.
Well, that is very encouraging. But is there anything that the committee does help with the reputation of the United States?
Well, sure. There's a few bills, one, actually both, dealing with Guantanamo Bay, the detention center. And one thing is to speed the closing of the center. Although that brings another issue, we do need to have a location where the United States can process terrorists. And a lot of resistance is coming up in the political parties in the United States for returning terrorists to the homeland. Actually having someone, let's say in New York or Chicago, when their whole mission in life is to kill Americans, now we're bringing them to American soil. So it is a bit of a sticky issue. But I think we're looking at closing down, and we'll establish something, and I'm sure the committee will be working to come up with a solution that's good for everyone. And that way we can process both the soldiers that we're capturing and the terrorists. And that's basically it.
In your personal opinion, does the detention facility, does shutting it down indeed help with the reputation of the U.S.?
Yes, I think it will. I think the name itself has become a negative factor, and as time progresses, we'll have an alternate location, an alternate processing system, and hopefully some of our allies and other United Nations members will assist with that.
How is the war going, considering that now the Democrats rule Congress pretty much? Now, how's that transition from being a Republican Congress to a Democratic?
Well, as a soldier and an officer, I'm not supposed to make political comments, but I would say that since the Democrats have come into power, it looks like we're expediting the process in Afghanistan as well as Iraq and other countries, so that once we've established the initial missions and achieved some of the objectives, we're focused now on pulling out once stabilization occurs. And I think that's being sped up by the Democratic leaders.
So how is the morale of our U.S. soldiers? Are they, pretty positive, or?
The morale is pretty high. I think they're seeing some results, as well as they're being encouraged by statements in Congress and the committee for expediting our return back to the United States.
Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for allowing us to interview you, Major Counts.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.